Here's something that might shock you. Your brain processes pleasure and pain in exactly the same regions, which means that your morning coffee hit and your worst headache are more closely connected than you'd think. Today we're exploring how this delicate balance shapes everything, from our daily habits to life-altering addictions.
Well, that's fascinating. So you're saying our brain is basically running this constant tug of war between feeling good and feeling bad?
Exactly, and here's where it gets really interesting. Research shows that every time we experience pleasure, our brain automatically increases our sensitivity to pain as a counterbalance. It's like a neurological seesaw that never stops moving.
Hmm. That makes me think about how our modern world must be completely throwing this system out of whack.
Studies show that the average person checks their phone 262 times per day. That's 262 potential dopamine hits. Our brains simply weren't designed to handle this constant stimulation.
So what happens when this delicate balance gets disrupted?
Well, this is where the concept of dopamine deficit comes in. When someone repeatedly seeks pleasure, their brain starts requiring more and more stimulation just to feel normal. It's like inflation in your reward system.
That really explains why social media platforms are designed to be so addictive. They're literally engineering these dopamine loops.
And here's something particularly alarming. Research indicates that early exposure to highly stimulating content can actually rewire developing brains. We're seeing children as young as 8 showing signs of digital addiction, or very young teenage boys with a sex addiction.
Oh, wow. So what's the solution? How do we break free from these cycles?
Well, experts recommend something called a dopamine fast, 30 days of complete abstinence from whatever your particular addiction might be. And 30 days because studies show it takes about 4 weeks for neural pathways to begin significant reorganization, and you rewire your brain.
That sounds incredibly challenging in today's connected world.
You're right. That's why self-binding techniques are crucial. Research shows that putting physical barriers between yourself and addictive behaviors is 60% more effective than relying on willpower alone.
Well, that makes sense when you consider how our genetic predisposition plays into all this.
Exactly. Studies indicate that genetic factors account for about 50 to 60% of addiction susceptibility. But here's what's fascinating. Environmental stress can activate these genetic predispositions that might otherwise remain dormant.
That really highlights how our modern lifestyle might be triggering these vulnerabilities.
And speaking of modern lifestyle, recent studies show that our tolerance for discomfort has decreased significantly over the past few decades. The average person now labels mild anxiety as a mental health crisis.
That's pretty concerning when you think about how it affects our resilience.
Especially when you consider that healthy stress actually strengthens neural pathways. Research shows that people who regularly face and overcome challenges have more robust dopamine systems.
So, how do we help someone who's genuinely struggling with addiction?
Well, studies show that combining empathetic support with clear boundaries is most effective. The data indicates that enabling behaviors can actually extend addiction cycles by up to 40%.
That's really eye-opening, especially considering how shame often prevents people from seeking help.
Recent research revealed that shame actually activates the same neural pathways as physical pain, which can drive people right back to their addictive behaviors as a coping mechanism.
So it becomes this vicious cycle.
Exactly. And here's what's really powerful about understanding all this. When we recognize these patterns, we can make more informed choices. Studies show that education about brain chemistry alone can increase recovery success rates by 30%.
That really helps remove some of the stigma, doesn't it?
Absolutely right. And as we wrap up, here's something to think about. Our brains evolved over millions of years to help us survive in a world of scarcity. Now we're living in a world of abundance, and we need to consciously adapt our behaviors to this new reality.